And yeah, thank you so much again for joining us. Yeah, absolutely. We can start with your introduction. I'll just mention real quickly, this is just a 30-minute session. We have some other groups we have to go into at the end. And we can start with that. Just a quick reminder to the students who are present, when you think of a question, go ahead and raise your electronic hand, or if you would prefer to have me ask the question, you can also post to the chat.
Okay, so let me just give you a little overview. So I've been at UF, believe it or not, 32 years. And I have the only such appointment in the entire the continent of North America, in that I have an appointment between the history department and between the biology department. Nobody else straddles. You know, one of the things I want you to think about is, what do we mean by interdisciplinary? How wide does it have to get? And I can tell you, I'm really frustrated and upset with Quest, the way it's set up, because, you know, they tell you, oh, this is interdisciplinary. No, it isn't. The humanities courses are standard humanities courses that you would get in the religion department or in the classics department. The science courses are standard science courses. My job is to literally bring these areas together. I do it in my scholarship and my research. I do it in media and outreach. And I try, you know, I'm getting kind of old, but I really believe in that part of the work at the University of Florida, and most anywhere. It's you know, it's not good enough for us to be writing books that 6 people read. We've got to find a way to get that information literally, not just into the classrooms, but out there. So for 32 years, I have been a professor. And one of the things I do with courses like this, Jacob, is to actually at some point try to teach students about the different ranks, because most undergraduates never get the course that tells you what an assistant professor is, what a full professor is, what a lecturer, an instructor, right? And that's really important when you're choosing your courses and who writes the letter of recommendation that you need to get into. You know, I do a lot of pre-meds, but I also do a lot of law students because I'm a historian. So in any case, I'm so old, Jacob, I wrote Joe Spillane's tenure letter. I was there when he was hired. To me, he's this little munchkin, right? He's like a junior scholar, when the reality is he's sitting there in the dean's office, right? He's, you know, the dean of the whole shebang for undergraduates. So my specialty is history of science, and sometimes I'm very historical and sometimes I'm very contemporary. I move back and forth, and my degree was actually in biology. And then I did training in the history of science at Cornell. And Cornell was a really interdisciplinary school. There's none of this departments, none of this take X number of courses for this program. Basically, the grad program in particular, but even the undergrad, is up to the individual student. You craft your courses of instruction based on your research, what you want to do. And that's why it's important that you choose 3 advisors. That's what we're required to do. And you move those people around. You use them to enable you. So it's a very different philosophy. And you know, I want to introduce that to you as you're thinking about your futures and how you function at UF. You actually do have a lot of agency. You just don't know it. I used to do preview. So my preview lecture was, you know, you're at a research university. People here do everything. It's really a cool place. But if you don't open your eyes and get proactive and talk to people, get to know your professors, get to know other students, you're going to be trapped taking really dull, required courses and not take advantage of what UF has to offer. I mean, I'm honestly, we do everything. And incidentally, I'm kind of down right now because of this stuff that's happening with our teaching. And, I'm one of the people behind the petition, you should know. But, for the most part, I chose to stay at UF because of the diversity of the experiences that were offered in the way of faculty research programs. So I am a booster. I've served as alumni professor, which means I've gone out and worked with alums, and I've seen different parts of the university. I'm really a College of Liberal Arts and Science person. I'm Madam Phi Beta Kappa, Professor Phi Beta Kappa. Here I am, traveled all over the country because, again, I consider myself sort of multidisciplinary. I try to bring understanding of science, the humanities and the social sciences together. And right now, my claim to fame, and I'll stop there, is, my specialty is evolution. I work on the history of evolution, Darwin, religion, but I also work on genomics and genetics, the history, but also the contemporary issues. And my most popular course for 26 years is called The History and Evolution of Infectious Disease. So right now, I'm in the front lines. I am on the ramparts, dealing with understanding, with policy. Herd immunity is another way of saying eugenics and social Darwinism. It's one thing when you're talking about herd immunity as a theoretical concept. It's an abstraction. It's another thing when you put it into policy. That's where you need people like me to come in and go, stop it. You cannot just do this. We've been there before and it has been disastrous. So in any case, that's what I do. You're all welcome to write to me if I forget to say that at the end. So let me just turn it to you guys.
Well, thanks so much for that introduction. That was awesome and gives us a lot to think about. So I hope there will be some good questions coming up in the chat. While folks are taking a minute to kind of process and think of their questions, I'll start with a couple from the pre-written list, if that's okay. You touched on this a little bit, talking about your starting with a biology degree, but a couple students had questions about kind of the origins of your research career. So Suba Hawk asks how you got into research, and then a related question from Miranda Benjamin. How did you become interested in evolutionary biology as a research topic?
Well, first of all, I was really lucky to attend a high school that had a really intense kind of, was run by hippies, guys. It was run by a bunch of hippies from refugees from the 1960s. And they really wanted to stress interactive mentoring and doing things, engaging material, whatever the area was. So for example, and this was in Canada, but I grew up across from Detroit, so that we would travel to Detroit and talk to Black Panthers and people who were part of the civil rights movement in the history course. In the biology course, I did 3 biology courses in high school. Now, if you can imagine that, right? So by the time I got to university, I had such an excellent background in both history, in English, in writing, really, really this kooky experimental school. And I'm an immigrant, I'm Greek and I'm from Egypt, if you can believe that. My father was a teacher, a physicist. So I had a family background that supported my interests, and I'm an only child. And it's amazing because women of my generation didn't do the things that I do. You've seen my big fat Greek wedding. The aunt in there is actually one of my childhood friends. So how did I get into this? I had a supportive family that really nurtured my intellectual interests. And what happened is, this is a really important piece of advice. And if you pick up one thing out of this, this meeting today, it is this: do not go against the grain. What do I mean by that? I mean, another way of saying it is follow your passions and who you are. Even when you're really young, your identities may not be cast in stone, but you're already formed. You have a set of interests. This is part of my teaching philosophy. I don't believe students are blank slates. You're all experts at something. And if you can somehow tap into what it is you love to do when nobody is telling you what to do, your parents, your teachers, if you can find an area you can move into, then I think you will be a very happy camper, and you're probably going to make, you know, a salary. I mean, I get paid for doing what I love to do. So what happened to me is I had to learn that the hard way. So because I came from this immigrant family, I felt that I had to do something ambitious, comprehensible, especially with my mother. You know, be a pediatrician. It's good for women to be pediatricians because you're around children. It was acceptable. So, you know, I went in this track. I loved biology, but I didn't know when I was like 18 or 19 and choosing my courses as an undergraduate, what part of biology I liked. I just didn't have that kind of awareness. And I realized after like my first or second year, that, you know, I was really attracted to the more theoretical aspects, to the existential. And by that, I mean the meaning of life. What I loved about biology is the fact that it told me who I was, how my body functioned, how I came to be. It provided me with this explanatory framework. And you know, I still persisted. I thought I'm going to become a researcher in biology. I go to Cornell and I'm studying paleontology at one point, paleobotany, because, you know, I didn't want to cut up little furry mammals. So I chose the plant world. And it wasn't because I love plants, it's because it was like a kind of a default major. Now I love plants because I know what it is, because I train so heavily that I appreciate what it is that they do. But in any case, it was a circuitous path. And it wasn't until I got to Cornell and I was a doctoral student training in research science that I found a way in the form of a mentor, a person, but also that particular graduate field that said to me, Betty, you don't have to choose between all of your interests. And, you know, when I was in high school, you know, I used to sit there reading art history books. I was on a television show called Reach for the Top. Like I was a quiz kid and I never missed art history questions. University called me and said, we're giving you a fellowship in art history. Guys, right then and there, if I came from a different class background, you know, because my dad was a scientist, my mother wanted me to be something socially acceptable and very gendered, I should have taken that fellowship and gone into art history. But as it is, it worked out perfectly because I could explore that interest in biology and the history. And if you take a course with me, guess what? You're going to see big canvases of paintings. You're going to get music. You know, you can just Google. I have a whole paper on Darwin and music. I have managed to bring all of my interests together. But, you know, I always had, I got to tell you, this is kind of the truth. I always had PhD on my diaper. I wanted to be an academic. I wasn't quite sure of what area to go in, but that I love, you know, reading books. I have thousands and thousands of books, all of that stuff. So that's how I came. And then miraculously, guess what? I interviewed for one job in 1988 and I got it. And that was at the University of Florida. So some of it is serendipity. There is the element of luck. But really, somebody asked me a question and said, how do you know? How does the balance? Yeah, I know. Here's the question I would ask each of you. And I ask my students because they come to me and they go, I don't know what to do with myself. My parents want me to do this. I don't want to study medicine. I really don't like it. My parents, are pressuring me. They have these expectations. And I just say to them, when you were 16 or 17, 16 is a good age because you're formed, you're a person. Um, but people have that society hasn't yet started really moving you in particular directions. What is it that you did when you were 16? Were you in your bedroom reading books? Were you memorizing poems? Were you writing essays? Were you literary? Did you have literary ambitions? Were you outside hiking? Were you cooking food for your friends? Were you schmoozing? Were you volunteering at some, a nursing home or some kind of place? Each of those tells me those activities. It isn't that I want you to be a nursing home, that I think you should be a nursing home director, but that tells me that you care about people, you're oriented towards helping people. So some kind of job where you're working directly with people in that way is a way that you're really tapping into something very deep. That's what I want to get at. The actual job isn't half as important as what it brings out, your skill set that comes naturally. That's why I always say, don't go against the grain. I mean, I can't imagine becoming a dentist and staring down people's teeth. My roommate married a dentist and she became a hygienist. And I go, Frida, you were an economist when we were living together. How can you stare down people's mouths, right? And she says, it's so interesting, Betty, and she tells me all about, and she says, and I really want to help people with better hygiene. So, it taps into, some kind of passion that she has.
Real quick for the
Yeah.
people watching the video, because the chat might not show up. Ruben's question in summary was, how do we find out what we love to do? That's what Dr. Smocovitis was responding to.
Who you were at 16 and ask yourself, what did you love to do?
And so Miriam Cruz is asking, as a biology major, this kind of relates to Ruben's, the first part of his question as well. Do you recommend focusing on core courses or explore other interests? And this gets a little bit to the differences between the undergraduate curriculum here versus other places like Cornell. And how can students experiment while still, fulfilling what they have to fulfill?
Do other courses. Take as many bizarro things, really things that will stretch you, things you don't expect, and do your homework on the instructor. Always get the teaching evaluations, get the recommendations from your friends, because a really good instructor will inspire you even in the most boring, what you thought was a boring subject. And it's very common for me. I used to have a PhD program, and there used to be an undergraduate major in history of science, and it was cut during the recession of 2008. And I can't believe what it has done as far as our undergraduate offerings. I now have, it's very sad because I get people who are in their fourth year and they come to me, or their third year, and they go, I've been looking for a course like this all my life. I never knew it existed, especially the biology majors. And I go, I'm here, I've been here, right? But they don't know that there are people like me on the campus who teach these interdisciplinary courses. And, I do a lot for the honors program. And that should tell you right then and there that, this is the kinds of, I think, inventive and interdisciplinary courses that are designed to push students. Mostly, we think about biology, but I do science. I can teach the atomic bomb. I taught the history of science course for decades and decades. So I think, I think you got to do your core courses, but I would really encourage you to just push yourselves. And if you really have a passion in biology, then take courses about biology. Do some philosophy courses, ethics of biology. Do some religion courses. There's people in the religion department who teach you about, environmental ethics, animal rights, we're all over the college. There, I'm not the only one. Yeah, I mean, evolutionary biology is definitely here. Philip has asked the question, how do you think the study of evolutionary biology will change moving forward? Well, it's always changing and it's everywhere. And I have a whole lecture on Darwin and evolution and popular culture. And at the end, my students come out of this class on the history of evolution seeing Darwin everywhere, because you think, oh, evolution is controversial. Guys, evolution is in the curves for COVID-19. That's why I'm out there, because that is evolution in action. Evolution is not just tortoises, and it's not just finches. It's mutation and recombination in viruses and bacteria. It is, you're literally watching an evolutionary process unfolding in real time. So it's, Philip, it's out there. It's successful. Don't let anybody tell you that it's some kooky, weird thing that's controversial. God is dead. We descended from apes. No, there are many ways to think about religion, whose science. Don't even, take a course with me if you want to talk about that. But it's not some big existential threat at all. And it is, ignore it at your peril. People are dying because they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing as far as preventing these outbreaks or monitoring them. I mean, my frustration is, when we first, I've written on this, you can Google my name. My students, January the 25th, my students in BSc 3042 heard me say, we're doomed. Guys, it's out there, human to human transmission. And my first reaction was, well, the Chinese didn't do anything about it the first time with SARS. What makes you think they're going to do anything about it now? And then the second thing is, we're doing it with factory farming. And if you travel down, it's not just the Chinese. We're just not being careful or mindful of how we're living our lives, how we treat animals, packing them together, on these deplorable conditions with industrial farming. That's how you get these disease. That's a disease incubator. That's where you get all of this stuff happening that gives rise to novel coronaviruses. Mikhail. It's, first of all, do you want to read these or do you want me to read them?
I usually read them. It's okay if you want to read them, but I'll just, so U10 asked how important, related to what you were just saying, I think, how important is the understanding of history and the sciences?
Oh, I mean, come on, absolutely. If you're going to be a scientist, if you're going to be a science writer, a reporter, which is a really cool job that actually gets you money, if you're going to be doing science policy, in which case you'll be working perhaps in a think tank or a government organization or running perhaps an NGO of some sort or working for them, you absolutely must have an understanding of the big picture. The only way you're going to get that big picture is through the history of science. And one of my real concerns, I mean, I've got two. I've got people who don't understand science on the one hand, and they're not following. They're not understanding disease evolution and disease ecology. And then I have the people on the other hand who think that science is going to cure all of the social problems we have out there. No, it won't, because it's done by fallible beings. So a history of science course really sensitizes you. It sensitizes you and it makes you aware of all the stupid things scientists have done, thinking that they were, well-intentioned people. I mean, those eugenicists thought they were improving society. That's why they launched eugenics, which was a catastrophe, right? They were well-intentioned. So what I try to do is to show the human and the social dimensions of science. And I take my students through, I call it the toilet of, disasters. And if you study the history of medicine, you know, the worst thing you could do was go to a doctor in the 18th century. They'd bleed you, they'd cup you, you know, sometimes you just need to be left alone. So the history of medicine, the history of science is filled with all of these disasters. But then what I do is to show you the way out. And I just say, you got anything better? You know, if we are careful, if we recognize our own fallibility, if we check our arrogance, because, you know, science requires a lot of humility, a lot of, you know, it's like the I don't know. There's nothing wrong with you saying, I don't know. Look at Fauci. Fauci just says, you know, we didn't know enough about masks when the virus broke out. That's what it's about. It's being able to say, you know, we just didn't know. And you can say we screwed up, but how is it really screwing up if you're forming an opinion based on your best available evidence? That provisional element is really important. So to come back to Tin Lin's question, I think it's really very important to study the history of science, all the examples ahead of you, and it can inspire you because you'll see how people come up with great ideas from really unexpected places, right? You know, the steam kettle's blowing and somebody gets the idea for the steam engine from listening to a steam kettle. Think little things like that.
And then we just have a little bit of time left, but I think
Yeah.
maybe Mikhail's question is a good one to end on. It seems to speak to, I think, an anxiety that a lot of students probably have, right? He says commonly told not to stretch too much, focus on one subject. Does the modern generation pressure individuals to master a specific area, and maybe they feel like they you know, don't have the time or the resources to explore all these areas? And what do you say to that?
First of all, I'm not a jack of all trades. I may sound like it, but I'm not. I publish within, and my areas are the evolutionary synthesis, which is really huge. I mean, it's really it's a big topic, okay? I am not a jack of all trades. Academics become, you know, in our scholarship, we're very narrow when you're an expert. And again, what counts as narrowness? I want to push you on what counts as a jack of all trades. And you guys still have time. You're undergraduates. And, you know, in the United States, most of you, and at Florida, you're getting BA degrees. I got a Bachelor of Science degree. In my 4th year at university, I went to my advisor and I said, you know, I really want to study German. I want to be a research scientist. And you cannot really get into, this was ages ago when, you know, people were still learning languages when they were going to do their graduate work. And this guy said to me, he said, Betty, I would love it if you studied German, but I can't allow it. This was the undergraduate advisor for biology. And he said, you've got to take these courses, and that is just too left field. The guy was Dutch. He spoke with this thick Dutch accent. And I don't know if you know anything about Dutch, but it's a relative of German, and he had trained at a German university. So I'm telling you this story so that you know that I actually had a very narrow undergraduate experience. I think you guys have the opportunity at UF to explore much more widely. I would say at the undergraduate stage, explore. Do your major, do your courses, do, you know, the core courses that you've got to take. Find good teachers, and you still have time to explore before you make up your mind. And the other thing is, you know, nobody is forcing you to follow a track. You may feel that you're being forced into it. That's what I'm trying to tell you is I felt it, and I tried to follow those tracks, and it was just, you know, I kept saying, I don't like this. I'm not happy. I'm not a happy camper. And if you're not going to be a happy camper, you're never going to excel at it. And can you imagine there's all these people? I mean, I know people now my age who are retiring early, and they say things like, I want to pursue my real passions. And I kind of go, how tragic. What do you mean? You weren't pursuing your passion all these years that you were an accountant? You know, accounting can be really challenging if you're working in the right place, in the right, you know, with the right people, with the right numbers. Or, you know, if you did it because it was like a default position. If you still don't know, why not take a year off? You know, that's what I tell people. Take a year off and read up, talk to people, get a job doing something else, learn. You know, we can't travel right now, so I can't tell you go traveling. But honestly, traveling a year, you know, the Australians do this walkabout. They graduate and they take a year of traveling, and students find themselves, you know, they're challenged by seeing different cultures and having sometimes scary, sometimes, you know, challenging experiences. So, I mean, I don't think, you know, Mikhail, I don't think there's necessarily a conflict there. That's what I want to get at.
This has been awesome. I hate to have to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Miriam says, thank you so much for all the great insight. I think we can all echo those sentiments. Amanda, Philip, everyone in chat says, thank you. And I agree. Thank you.
And you can get jobs not just in my field. Let me tell you, since it's research oriented, a lot of people in my field work in museums. They become writers. Some of them write, you know, big books that make oodles of money, like they write biographies. And a lot of them work in policy. And you know, they're talking heads on television shows. They have my kind of training, but the job is different. You know, as I said, I really wanted to be an academic.
Awesome.
Okay.
Appreciate this so much. And I appreciate you offering that students can contact you. I hope that some who are interested will take the initiative and do so.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm one of those people who likes the interactions, and this COVID thing is really kind of frustrating.
It is.
You know, it really is. So anyways, courage, guys. We'll pull through. And definitely you guys will pull through. Just be careful. Philip, I love the mask. Love the US photograph. That's beautiful behind you. Okay, sign
right.
off.
Goodbye. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.